Poppy Playtime started in ARG last week, and we have been given tons of different never-before-seen documents and hints from the developers themselves, revealing a hidden new story that could be the start of Chapter 3. So if you weren't aware, for a little while now, the developers have been hinting that there has been some sort of Poppy Playtime ARG going on. First, when they send me and a bunch of different content creators a letter giving us a random IP address. And second, when they revealed their brand new game called Project Playtime, that in the teaser image revealed the same IP. Anyway, after a lot of testing, we found out that the IP address was an FTP server, or in other words, upon entering the set of numbers into different softwares, we were able to connect to an official Poppy Playtime server that is said to contain some massive lore secrets if it could be uncovered. However, as you could imagine, these files, whatever they may be, were locked behind both a username and a password. So in these past couple weeks, everybody has been digging through hundreds of files and documents to try and figure out what in the world this username and password could be. And yesterday, we would be given some insane updates by the developers themselves that could reveal it all. You see, on Twitter, there's a mysterious account that goes by the name of Playtime Co, which we know is owned by the Poppy Playtime developers since they follow the account themselves. However, what's interesting is that for a while, this account remained entirely inactive with no tweets or interactions. That is until just yesterday, where they would randomly reply to mob games themselves with a piece of paper that reads, "Lately, there have been some issues regarding company security that we feel we need to address. While we like to keep it all fun in games at Playtime Co, employee confidentiality is something that we take very seriously. Per the non-disclosure agreement rules laid out in Section 3, page 42 of the Playtime Co employee handbook, any breach of confidentiality may result in termination or prosecution. Leaking sensitive secrets to your friends, the press, or authorities ruins the fun for everyone. To ensure that we keep the spirit of honesty and integrity, information technology will be doing a thorough sweep of the Playtime Corporation computer database. Luckily, this maintenance will be done outside of working hours, so there will be no impact on employee workflow. Nobody cares about your safety and security more than us. And as our great founder Elliot Ludwig always said, Playtime Co is my family, and family looks after one another. Let's not forget that should you see someone breaking rules and putting others at risk, it's your duty to say something. Playtime Co reserves the right to view and delete any employee files, messages, and emails as the company deems fit. Deliberate attempts to prevent this search may result in disciplinary action. Honesty is the best policy. Employees will be subject to questioning and investigation if appropriate. Rowan stole information technology. So this is a crazy document that we'll break down in a second, but there's also another interesting clue given from this Twitter account as well. Because if we look at the people Playtime Co is following, they specifically follow 4 different accounts: Mob Games, Eddie MN Ritterman, Leith Pierre, and finally Stella Graber. And if you couldn't already tell, these 3 private accounts shown here are actually the names of different characters inside of the Playtime Co factory. So this could maybe tell us even more about what's going on here. So we have all of this huge amounts of different information, but what could it all mean? Well, the Poppy Playtime developers are clearly trying to tell us a story here about the breaching of their very own factory. See, if we look at the letter I was originally sent, as I mentioned in other videos, the letter contains what I assume to be an employee based on them writing over a private employee document, writing a panicked letter warning the recipient that there is something going wrong inside of the factory and that they need desperate help, even telling them to take all of the evidence that they find straight to the police. So for what seems like the very first time in history, somebody inside of Playtime Co knew about all of the different dark secrets and was trying to tell everybody inside of the outside world. And we also know this was back when Playtime Co was still in business, based on the letter being dated on July 15th, 1991. In fact, it was right after the toy Mommy Longlegs was first released. However, looking at the second employee letter, we could see that there is some concerning continuity here, because this security notification was written just 5 days after the initial letter I just mentioned was sent out. So clearly in this new notification where they warn people about keeping everything confidential is directly targeted at whoever wrote this letter, because clearly they broke the employee terms by telling people their secrets and even apparently getting caught with it. So clearly these 2 letters are trying to tell us a greater story. A story about an employee in Playtime Co who had discovered a secret nobody else was supposed to know, and upon finding this all out, they very quickly wrote a letter over an employee confidentiality agreement and swiftly sent it out before they got caught, giving the letter recipient this IP address, hoping to reveal the secrets of the factory inside of their computer. But this wasn't without retaliation, because the company would quickly respond in what seemed like a corporate-friendly way. However, they seemed to be visibly upset by the security breach and may have actually been investigating the employee to take them down in whatever way they can. So this is a really cool and interesting side story, but this then brings up the question of what is inside of the files that were supposed to to be getting into, and what could the original username and password even be? Well, to discover this information, it's most likely assumed that the username at least would probably just be the name of the person who was actually sending out the letter, meaning whoever actually sent the letter out is somebody who we actually probably know by name. But if we're gonna figure out the username and password, this then brings up the question of who wrote this letter. Well, my first suspicion in my last video was that it could be the character Stella Graber, because Stella is Latin for star, which is the shape we see by the IP address in the initial teaser, and Graber is a German name representing digging graves. So it seemed like the devs were subliminally trying to tell us that she was the person writing this letter, and it seemed to make a lot of sense on the surface, but after getting this brand new letter, I don't really think this is actually the case. Stella seems to be incredibly important to the company, and clearly they have a good relationship with her since they follow her on Twitter, and I don't really think Stella is the type of person to be writing frantic letters begging for help about the factory, when we can hear in her one cassette tape in the game she was obsessed with Playtime Co and toys, and showed almost weird interest in being experimented on after wanting to be young again and showing her insane love for toys in the factory. So if I'm being honest, I don't think Stella is much of a suspect in the way that we may have thought, but with that being said, who could it be? Well, as of right now, I can't say for sure, but we do have a lot of options. This new piece of paper all but confirmed to us that the writer was clearly a Playtime Co employee, so it means that if it's not Stella, it must be another employee with a full name like Marcus Brickley, Laith Pierre, Elliot Ludwig, among many other smaller different characters, including us, the player. So which of these employees could be the mysterious writer of the letter? Well, we can pretty convincingly rule out Laith Pierre and Elliot Ludwig, obviously, and we also don't know what the player's name is, so that rules that out as well. But what about this random Marcus Brickley character? Who even is Marcus? Well, Marcus Brickley is actually Jacksepticeye's famous character from Chapter 2, and for the most part, on the surface, this character doesn't seem to have much of a purpose outside of him being a Jacksepticeye cameo. He just seems like a scared young employee, especially after what he describes as this incredibly dark encounter with what he calls a mysterious creature, describing who we now know as PJ Pugapillar, meaning he clearly didn't know about the experiments going on at this point, but was terrified about what they may be, giving off oddly similar vibes to the terrified expression that we see on the letter we were first given. In fact, despite this character's appearance being relatively small, the fact that they have a full-blown video must mean that they have some sort of importance that we weren't expecting. But of course, all of this is a little bit of a stretch, and it wouldn't really matter that much to the story to the naked eye. But the thing that makes Marcus look incredibly suspicious is what we see if we look at the date of this interview. March 21st, 1991. The same exact year that this letter was written. In fact, this interview was just a couple months before it. So despite it seeming like a Hail Mary, could Marcus actually be the writer of this letter? Well, it lines up pretty well in my opinion. Marcus encountered the scary PJ Pugapillar and did an interview in March of 1991. And then as the months passed, he grew more and more curious and eventually found out the dark secrets of Playtime Co, those of which we don't know right now. And then in a panic, he wrote this letter and sent it out to his mother in hopes of getting help, with Playtime Co getting on the case trying to track down who could have done this all. And while this story is still somewhat unfinished, it gives us some ideas as to not only what the username and password for this ARG could be, but also maybe what we could expect in the future story of Poppy Playtime and its upcoming third chapter that's releasing here in 2023. Because if you didn't know, in the third chapter, for the very first time, we're going to be exploring the never-before-seen Playcare location, which is theorized to supposedly contain all of the different experiment subjects we have been seeing throughout the entire game. And also, as an interesting side note, we know from different unused intros for Poppy Playtime that Playtime Co shut down after military vehicles showed up at the building, suggesting that maybe this security breach was actually successful, and Playtime Co could have gone into complete panic behind the scenes. But I guess we'll just have to wait for Chapter 3 to find those things out. But to see what happens with the rest of this ARG and what the files could be hiding behind it, subscribe here because I imagine they'll be solved really soon. In fact, one of the developers themselves even said they think the ARG will be solved today. Anyway, peace.